Good morning, good afternoon. Wherever you're joining us from, please share in the chat where you're located. So it's always nice to see where we have people coming from. All right, we got Patty from Finland. Welcome, Patty. You can see there's a few more people filtering in. Bogdan from Newcastle in the UK. Alexander in Germany. I'm in Germany as well. Welcome, everyone. All right, so as people are filtering in, I'm going to go ahead and start the session. So thank you for those who are joining. My name is Julia. I'm a scientific engagement manager at protocols.io. I'm going to be moderating the session today, and I'll introduce all of our panelists in a moment. We're very excited to be part of Love Methods Week. This is, I think, the third year in a row that we've been participating. We had a really great session yesterday, and we're excited to have another session today. So I'll get some housekeeping out of the way. So the session is being recorded, and all registrants will be emailed that recording after the session, and we'll also make sure it's available alongside other Love Methods recordings wherever they're put centrally. Closed captioning is also enabled. If that's something that you would like to use, you'll need to go down and press the relevant button in Zoom. And then I'll talk a little bit about the webinar format in a moment. There will be a panel discussion, and there will be the opportunity for you as the audience to provide input throughout, but we will save answering specific questions till the end of the session. So we'll have about 10 minutes for that. When you do have questions, I'd like to ask that you please use the Q&A function instead of putting them in the chat. It makes it a lot easier for us to keep track of the questions, what we have and haven't answered. All right. So I'll now introduce our panelists. And so each of these people is acting as a representative of one of our Springer Nature journals or software platforms. I also have two people in the background, Emma and Marika. So they'll be helping out moderating the chat and can sort out any issues on that side. So you can read a little bit about where each of our panelists are from. And as I introduce each person, if you want to go ahead and wave or something, please feel free. So we have joining us today Linda Gummlich. She's a lead editor at BMC Methods. Sabrya Carim, senior editor at Nature Cell Biology. Bronwen Dekker, senior editor at Nature Protocols.
Hello.
And Dominique Morneau-Brosnan, chief editor at Nature Reviews Methods Primers. So those are our journal representatives. And we also have joining us Lenny Teytelman, who's the founder and president of Protocols.io, which is not a journal, but a workflow tool for method development and sharing. So the format that we have planned today is shown here. We have collated a list of around 6 to 7 common myths and misconceptions that we regularly hear from researchers like you around the topics of protocol and method publishing. And so what we'll do is review the myths in the form of a scenario and a question relating to that scenario, like, should it be best practice? Is this something that you would do? So it's not a quiz. I think try and answer honestly in terms of what is your current understanding and what you would actually do day to day, rather than maybe trying to guess what the answer should be. And so we'll give you the opportunity to vote on that in the poll. We'll review the results of the poll together, and then we'll hear from our panel members on what is their take from the specific perspective of their journal or platform. And as a heads up to our panelists as well, to keep us moving, I might jump in if we're taking too long on specific myths, just so we can cover them all. So I hope that's clear to everyone in the audience, but what we're going to do is jump straight in to the first myth, and I think it will become clear very quickly. So you'll see our first scenario on the slide here. I'll read that out in a moment. And then after I read out the scenario, we'll launch the poll. You'll be able to, it will pop up in a new window. You'll be able to move that around. I would suggest kind of putting it here on the right so you can see it next to the question. You'll have 20 seconds to answer the poll, and then we'll close it and review the results. So we'll launch the poll now. And I've started the time. All right, I can see some answers coming in. Oh, we started going one way, but a few yeses and nos have come through. All right, we're going to close the poll now and then share the results. So it looks like this one wasn't too divisive. So 85% of people said, no, this is not best practice. A couple of people said yes. So we'll hear from our panelists just now on their perspectives. So I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Bronwen, and I'll ask you the same question that we asked in the poll. So is this best practice?
I don't think so. I think that it is always better to place it somewhere where it'll be more fun, more easy to search for, and it's good to include it have it as something that can be separately cited as well. It's worth bearing in mind that many journals have relaxed the word count for method sections. So it is possible to include quite a lot of methodological information in the main part of the article. And then there are so many resources, for example, protocols.io, where you can place your methods so that they can be separately cited and used.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So I think one thing that we hear is that authors are also concerned about self-plagiarism, and they'd rather put that in another place than kind of risk having that same text in multiple places. Is that something that should be a concern?
I think this is something where it might depend on the journal, but I know that for Springer Nature, our plagiarism checker allows us to exclude the method section, and there is an understanding that there is often only one way to accurately express technical information. So I don't think that there is a concern about overlap or replicating the information, but it is also a good opportunity to add experimental detail if you have modified the method.
Mm-hmm. So I know, Bronwen, you mentioned that protocols.io can be one of the places where you can put this method detail instead of the supporting information. Did you want to talk about that a little bit, Lenny, as the protocols.io representative?
Just unmuting myself. So I'll say that in terms of the supporting information, just as Bronwen said, the same reasons that DNA sequences or protein sequences should go in a repository and code we try to put on GitHub rather than attach a giant zip file. The same thing applies to methods. It is much better. It's great if you're sharing methods, period, right? So supporting information, not the most important thing is to share the protocols, but it is a much better practice to have the protocols in the repository or in the main text if there is space and it fits. And on the idea of reusing the text and worries that we see on social media, it pops up over and over, worries that reusing the exact same method text or protocol from a publication 2 years ago is plagiarism. Actually, the Committee on Publication Ethics explicitly carves this out and advises against trying to rephrase text and possibly mess up the methods that you're reporting because you're worried about recycling the text. So for methods specifically, this kind of recycling is not considered plagiarism, and the Committee on Publication Ethics says that you should report exactly what you've done, and if it hasn't changed, use the same language. Don't try to, on purpose, change the sentences because you're worried that this is plagiarism.
Great. Thanks, Lenny. Thanks, Bronwen. Did anyone else from the panel have something to add to that? No? All right. We're going to go ahead and move on to the second scenario then. All right. So this other scenario is Jane publishes a protocol on protocols.io. Later that year, she includes the same protocol in a journal article. Is this acceptable? So we're going to go ahead and launch the poll. And remember, you have 20 seconds to answer. All right, 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. We're going to close the poll now. Looks like we have another relatively almost unanimous decision there. So most people said yes, this is acceptable. Only 2 people said no, it's not acceptable. So I know we'll hear from Lenny again as the protocols.io representative, but I wanted to start with you, Sabrya. So for Nature Cell Biology, is this acceptable?
Hi, everyone. Yes, thanks, Julia. Yes, this is actually acceptable from NCB's perspective. And well, the reason is it's fine nowadays to publish a protocol on protocols.io and then include it in the manuscript. And even sort of smoother at NCB, it's been over 6 months now, but since around April last year, we now have an integration between our submissions system platform, so where you would submit your manuscript, with protocols.io. And it's highly encouraged for authors that have a protocol or developed a protocol that is used in an article that you're submitting to the journal to then link this article to the protocols.io submission, so where the detailed protocol is, and even have it peer reviewed. And this will appear in the peer review comments that authors then address if the manuscript is invited back for revision. And if a protocol that is linked to the NCB paper is actually peer reviewed, it will appear, I believe, on the protocols.io website that it has been peer reviewed. There's a badge that indicates it there. And then once the paper is published, it's linked to the protocol.io submission in the reference list, which makes, I think, archiving and access easier.
Great. So what about our other journal representatives? Would we say that across the board that this is acceptable?
I'd like to say that for nature protocols, sharing in a repository or preprint server, or which includes protocols.io, does not preclude publishing the same material in nature protocols at a later time. And I think that it's sort of the reverse is also true. I mean, if you're using the procedure from a protocol that we have published, it would be fine to replicate that bit of the procedure in your own work and to take that chance to adapt it. I think most people that use nature protocols adapt the procedure that they've published or that has been published for use in their own experiments. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Bronwen. So what about the reverse scenario? So if someone publishes their protocol in a journal article, can they then publish that on protocols.io? And why might they want to do that? Did you want to touch on that, Lenny?
We have a lot of examples of that, and it's usually because labs that do method development, they optimize, then improve the method, so they publish something, and a year later, they have a more scalable version of it or more cost-efficient version, and yet usually you don't go back and try to publish another version of the paper, and that's where protocols.io comes in, because you can easily, with a click of a button, update it and share a new version. I should also say, because we have a lot of Springer Nature journals and editors represented here, and protocols.io, for full disclosure, was acquired by Springer Nature in 2023, so that it doesn't seem like these things we're talking about are specifically Springer Nature policies or because protocols.io is part of Springer Nature. We've never, since we launched in 2014, we've never had an instance of a journal being upset that a protocol has been shared on protocols.io and is now submitted for publication. It's exactly as Bronwen said, because protocols.io doesn't peer reviewed, what you share on protocols.io is seen as a preprint sharing, same as on bioRxiv or arXiv. It's not considered a prior journal publication, so it does not preclude you. And I think there's now over 1,000 journals, all of Wiley journals, lots outside of Springer Nature that explicitly encourage in author guidelines using protocols.io. And as I said, in 12 years, we've never had an instance of a journal being upset that something is being submitted to them that has already been shared on protocols.io.
Can I just quickly point you to a question that came in, which I think is relevant, that maybe Lenny can answer, about who owns copyright when something's on protocols.io? Question is, after uploading protocol to protocols.io, will copyright transfer to protocols.io, or is it just data repository platform? This protocol will be peer reviewed, same as manuscript.
So anything that's shared publicly is CC BY, it's open access. It belongs to the authors. We are a platform for sharing. So same way that if you share code on GitHub, you're not transferring code to Microsoft. If you're sharing a protocol on protocols.io, you're not transferring copyright to protocols.io. You're the owner and author of the content. And it's actually explicit in our terms of service that we are not the holders of the copyright to the content.
Thanks, Emma. All right, well, we'll go ahead and move on to our next scenario. And so this one is, you're looking for peer-reviewed protocol and methods advice for your experiment. This will be difficult because most protocols online are not peer-reviewed. Is this true? So we'll launch the poll, and I'm going to go ahead and start the timer. Oh, this one's looking to be maybe a little bit more divisive. And 5 more seconds. And we're going to close the poll and share the results. So we can see that 65% of people said no, it's not true. And then 35% of people said yes, it is true. So looking at everyone in the panel now, do you want to put your hand up if people can find peer-reviewed methods on your journal or platform? All right, so we've got 3 out of 5. And does anyone want to start talking about that? Will anyone volunteer?
Well, it happens that Nature Protocols is publishes peer-reviewed content. But we across Springer Nature, there's a database of published methods called experiments, which is great. But actually, most of the protocols on that site are not peer reviewed because they are accessed from book publications like Methods in Molecular Biology, and book publishing is quite different. So even though these protocols have DOIs, because of that's how they're shown on the website, those are not actually peer reviewed. So yeah, I'm interested that a lot of people were finding it easy to find peer-reviewed protocols.
Thanks, Bronwen. So Linda, did you want to touch on this from BMC Methods perspective?
Hi everyone. I mean, I can only say like Bronwen that yeah, in our journal they are peer reviewed, but as I've seen and Bronwen mentioned before, there are a lot out there that are not peer reviewed. So I was also a bit surprised by the results, but I can confirm that in our journal they're definitely peer reviewed.
Thanks, Linda. So I think Sabrya and Lenny, both of you kept your hands down. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Lenny.
Sabrya, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just delayed putting my hand up.
Okay.
I think with the integration of the protocols IO with the NCB submission system, a lot of our authors are choosing to upload their protocols from submission stage to the protocols IO platform. And as a result, that version gets peer reviewed. And not to go into the technicalities of it, but once it's uploaded and it goes for peer review, that version on protocols IO can't be updated until it comes back for revision. And so, yes, from now on, we can have protocols that are peer reviewed. And I should say as well, as a sort of an extension to that, NCB publishes various formats of research articles, one of which is our technical reports. And we do mandate a deposition of the protocol for our technical reports. We don't actually mandate it for the other article types, or research articles or resources, but it is for the technical reports. So certainly in a technical report, one may find a protocol that has been peer reviewed.
Thanks very much. Lenny?
And I was just thinking during the question that it is a nuanced answer because there has been a sort of renaissance in journals appearing over the last 15 years that welcome method submissions. Nature Protocols did it, I think, back in 2006, very early on. Nature Methods was started in 2004, Cold-Spring Harbor Protocols around the same time. And over the last 10 years, more and more journals like BMC Methods have come online, explicitly welcoming methods for peer review. So that has shifted over the last 20 years. But just as others on the panel said, I think most protocols in biomedicine, whether it's Elsevier book series, Springer Nature, or Cold-Spring Harbor, they are in books and they're carefully selected. They may be very high quality protocols, but they're not necessarily peer reviewed. And on the protocols IO side, even though there are a lot of protocols that end up as publications being peer reviewed, most of the public protocols that accompany publications, they're submitted as part of research papers, and the paper itself is peer reviewed, but we never know if the reviewers are actually looking at the protocol itself. So even when it's part of a research paper, the protocol is online, the paper may be peer reviewed, but it is possible that reviewers didn't look at the protocol. So it's a little bit nuanced answer. You can find peer reviewed protocols, but I think the bulk are not peer reviewed explicitly.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Lenny.
just in response to that, I was realizing that when we're talking about protocols, when I talk about protocols, I'm specifically thinking of something that has a procedure with instructions in the active tense kind of object. But as a different type of object, people publishing the introduction of a new method, I suppose these papers have been published for many, many years and have been extremely popular and well cited over many decades. Yeah.
I'd like to just quickly add, sorry.
Go ahead.
So at Nature Reviews Methods Primers, we don't publish protocols, but we do publish methods advice, and all of that is peer reviewed. So if you're looking for specific advice on your method, you might want to check there first, and it will be peer reviewed.
Right. So hopefully everyone who answered yes to this question will now know where they can find some peer-reviewed methods for their research. Moving on to the next scenario. So this one is tailored a bit towards computational methods. So our scenario is Blake runs a machine learning analysis on clinical data using a familiar Python stack. The lab has used this pipeline for years, so it's considered standard. They briefly report the pipeline used and the use of default parameters. So would you do this? We'll launch the poll now, and you've got 20 seconds. Ten more seconds. We've got another one that's a little bit more evenly split, it looks like. And we will close the poll, although it looks like some more are coming through, and we'll share the results. So most people said yes, they would do this. And then around 37% said no, they wouldn't do this. So Dominique, I think, can you touch on when reporting things like code and computational methods, what is the minimum information that is needed to help ensure reproducibility?
So at minimum, we would expect a code availability statement that indicates where the code is deposited. So all the code should be deposited in a public repository like GitHub or Zenodo. And the code should be accompanied by some test data and a metadata file that explains exactly how to use it and how the test data should run. Now, best practice is to include version numbers or to place the code and the accompanying metadata within a container like a Docker container. And the reason why is because when you put code on GitHub, if you make it public, which it should be, people will make adjustments to it. And so the version of the code that you're using that someone will be using down the line may not be the same version of the code that you have used. So putting everything in a container can really help keep that standard.
Great. Thanks, Bronwen. Thanks, Dominique. And so I think on the topic of computational methods as well, so I think that if someone has a computational method, is that a protocol, which I think is something that has historically had wet lab connotations? And would something like a computational method be suitable for somewhere like Nature Protocols or protocols.io? Bronwen, did you want to start as the Nature Protocols person?
Yes. So Nature Protocols does publish computational protocols. We started actually quite early on, and it was almost as an experiment because we weren't sure whether it was going to work as having a procedure section. But it turns out that it actually does work quite well and has been proven quite popular.
All right, so don't be scared off by the word protocol. It's pretty broad, I think, nowadays in terms of very different kinds of methods. And would you say that's the same with protocols.io, Lenny?
Yeah, when we launched, we thought it's just for wet lab methods. And as soon as we launched, the first major request was to expand it to bioinformatics computational pipelines. So that was early on in 2014 that the scope of protocols.io moved beyond just the hands-on wet lab work.
Great. All right, so for the audience, it sounds like have a think about what you're reporting if you are reporting computational methods, and the requirements might be a little bit more stringent than you expect. We'll move on to scenario number 5. So Sally has developed a protocol and has data showing that the protocol works, but she doesn't yet have amazing new data or results from a discovery using that protocol. So this next poll will be a little bit different. We're asking the question, where can she publish this method? And you'll see all of the different journals and representatives that we have with us today. So we've launched the poll and started the timer. All right. 10 more seconds. And we'll close the poll and share the results. All right, so it looks like every platform got at least one vote, but the majority were on protocols.io. So I'll ask everyone on the panel to add something here today. So if you would accept something from this scenario, can you put your hands up? All right, so BMC is a yes, they would accept this. Protocols.io is a yes. Any other yeses? Sabrya, all right. And I think we've got a little bit of a summary on this slide. So what you'll see is that there is Dominique's journal missing here. Do you want to explain why that is, Dominique?
Yeah, so Nature Reviews Methods Primers is a reviews journal. So we don't publish research articles. We wouldn't consider publishing anything like this. It just wouldn't fit our scope.
Great. So you're first there, Linda. So for BMC methods, there is some requirements. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes. So it is most likely possible that we would consider that protocol, but that protocol must show some kind of advance over what has already been standard or published. So we wouldn't consider a completely standard protocol. So there needs to be an advancement or a new angle. But in terms of the data, for us, it's more important that it works, that it's scientifically correct, the data you're showing, but it doesn't have to show amazing new data from discovery. It's more important that it's solid, that it works. But we do require that the data that they found, that the protocol is working, is published in a peer-reviewed journal. But again, it doesn't have to be the most amazing discovery. There are inclusive journals, for example, in the BMC series where this is possible to publish. Yes, so it's possible as long as there's another article that shows your data in a peer-reviewed journal. It's more important that it works and it's correct.
Great. Thanks, Linda. All right, so I'll move down the screen. So Sabrya, did you want to talk about your journal requirements next?
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned, for this would be acceptable as a technical report because our articles usually would have some data of some cell biological finding. And technical reports are usually reporting a technique that is new or an advance over existing techniques, but that allows a deeper or higher resolution analysis than existing techniques. I would say it would be fine under certain conditions to publish a paper that only has the protocol with the data that shows that it works and not have sort of additional biological insights, with a caveat to it that the protocol itself would need to be validated and properly benchmarked against existing tools or techniques out there to sort of clearly show the advance. So this is more important for a technical report, so the validation and the benchmarking, than actual new biological insights. But to say, a lot of the times authors do usually actually apply the new technique to trying to get new biological insights, but it isn't mandated for the technical report at NCB.
Great. How about you, Bronwen? What's the
Okay,
stance from Nature Protocols?
so Nature Protocols doesn't publish any new research findings. So similar to Nature Review's Methods Primers, we are actually more of a review type journal. So all of our protocols have already been shown to work by having been used in another research article that has been published in a primary research journal. So the type of data that we include that might not have already been published is data connected with the method validation, optimization, and troubleshooting. And in a specific scenario, we would normally expect a proof of principle research article to be published first, and it might not necessarily need to have an amazing new research finding if it is something that could be used to, generate new and interesting research findings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it sounds like there's some data that's needed from publication elsewhere, but it's flexible on how amazing the discovery is.
Yes.
Great. All right, so last but not least, Lenny. So Protocols.io got the most votes in the poll. So people think that Protocols.io will accept most things. Do you want to touch on that?
So of course, because we're not a journal, we're not making editorial decisions. We're just screening to make sure that there is no spam or pseudoscience, similarly to preprint servers. But we are not judging, is this novel enough? Is this interesting enough? But so that is correct, and you can see the summary. So we are different in that way, but it's not formal publication as we've discussed in this conversation. But I will also say that there are instances we see where someone has maybe spent 2 years trying to get a method that works in, say, wolves to work in coyotes, right? And that's a big chunk of your PhD. And you might not have had the opportunity to apply the method and learn new insights in coyotes yet because it took you so long to just get it to work. But we do see people publishing the fact that it works as long as you can show that, yes, we got this transferred, and here is the trick to getting it from wolves to coyotes. So for a lot of people, their first publication as a PhD scientist can be the protocol and showing that it works even before you have interesting data that reveals something about the nature of coyotes.
Before you move to the next one, Julia, there's a question about this particular scenario. Bogdan is asking which of these would be most open and less restrictive for access and reuse?
Does anyone from the panel want to start with that? Do you want to read the question again, Emma?
Yeah, which of the options for this myth about where to publish these kinds of protocols would be the most open and least restrictive for access and reuse? So I suppose thinking about whether a journal is open access, thinking about what kind of reuse can happen easily.
I think the answer to that is obviously protocols.io. Can I just say that? Because it is completely open access, and the copyright is so, it does allow reuse. I think that some of the like Nature Protocols and Nature Reviews Methods Primers, I think what we publish enables reuse because of the level of detail about how to adapt methods, the type of information that, introducing a person who's new to a technique on what is important in terms of method, experimental design, and the level of detail that is required. But just in terms of being able to access, I think, protocols.io. Lenny, what is your comment?
I'm actually thinking that yes, there can be difference in whether it's subscription or open access content, but BMC methods is open access, and I think it's the same
That is true.
license standard as on protocols.io, scientific reports, Nature Communications, +1. But in general, I'm thinking beyond journals, the nature of methods and protocols is such that we are supposed to take them and reuse them. So I think in the scientific community in general, there is an acceptance that when we share methods, people will take them, use them, modify them, and I can't say that I've seen complaints from the scientific community in the last 10 years that this is my method and someone changed it. Like there's an expectation that we take, reuse, modify, and hopefully report exactly what we've changed rather than saying, just see this other method, we made some tweaks to it. You don't know what the tweaks are. So beyond the journals, I feel like there's just a wide acceptance that when methods are shared, it is for the purpose of reuse, extending, adopting them, and then sharing what you've changed. But I'm not an editor, right? So this is just my sense from the research community.
Thanks for sharing, Bronwen and Lenny. Did anyone else want to touch on that before we move on? No? All right. Thanks for that question, Bogdan. Next scenario. So Kai is using a common technique. Because it's so routine, the reporting requirements are minimal, and they present their final data, images, and p-value. Would you do this? And we will launch the poll now and start the time. All right, a few more seconds. Get your votes in. And we'll close the poll and share the results. All right, so this one we've got exactly 50-50. So that's our first one of today. So a lot of people would do this, a lot of people wouldn't. So let's go ahead and start with you, Dominique. So to get into this question, I'll start off by asking, would you say that the most common methods are the most rigorously reported?
So I would say no to that question. There's a lot of tacit knowledge when using common techniques that may or may not be reported. Like Lenny said, tweaks are made to protocols all the time. The more it's being used, the more it's going to be changed to fit different lab scenarios. And so this can affect not only the use of the method for someone else trying to replicate results, but again, the reproducibility of the findings can also be affected. So my suggestion, I mean, it's every journal suggests it, is that minimum reporting standards must be met, but it's important to remember that these are a minimum and that everyone can and should actually report as much detail as they can. All the parameters should be described. The raw data should be submitted somewhere. Figshare, I can't remember the other platform now off the top of my head, but
Zenodo?
That's a good one, yeah, because it comes
Yeah.
with the DOI. Or it can be provided in supplementary data files, but those should be usable. So that's usually Excel, big Excel tables, as opposed to figures and Word documents. Statistical tests have to be named, and we do suggest exact p-values provided where possible, not just p is less than 0.05.
Mm-hmm. So to elaborate on that, so what kind of risks happen when methods that are widely used the reporting maybe is maybe only at those minimal levels and isn't as rigorous as it could be.
Yeah, so that affects reproducibility. So it affects another group's ability to replicate your findings and then can call into question whether or not your findings are actually correct. The massive risk again being that things are changed without reporting. Certain parameters can be tweaked, certain parameters are not reported, and it just affects reproducibility and is bad practice.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So, did anyone else want to touch on this? Any of the other journals?
I think that this is a really good example of where something like protocols.io can come into its own, because I think that there is a lot of deviation in how people do standard methods, because even if they've got the book in front of them, they tend, I think researchers often adapt to whatever reagents and the conditions that they have in their own lab. And I think that it would be good for that to be captured, both to see differences in the results that are obtained and also to be able to get a really good idea for what methods are completely robust to things being changed and which ones actually require things to be more or less the same or exactly the same in order to get the same results.
Yeah, that's a nice point about what's flexible versus what's critical with a method. So if someone is using a standard method and they're making small tweaks to it, how can they share that easily on protocols.io, Lenny?
I mean, that is at the heart of why we created protocols.io. That's what it is meant to serve. So it's easy to take somebody else's method, click, create a fork copy of it, and we try to give credit to the original authors and the people that make modifications. There's a button to compare the protocols side by side. So it is the core functionality, and it's easy to reuse and build and modify if you see somebody else has shared a very similar technique.
Great. All right, so we're coming up to time and we have one more scenario, so let's get to that one. And so this one is kind of similar topic around reusing others' methods. So our scenario is Taylor finds someone else's protocol on a website and she copies it to protocols.io and publishes it. So she does cite the original authors, but she hasn't made any changes to their protocol. Is this acceptable? And we will launch the poll. And a few more seconds. And we're closing the poll now. All right, so this one has been nearly unanimous. So 14 out of 15 people said no, this is not acceptable. One person said yes, it is acceptable. So I'll pick on you again, Lenny, since this one is specific to protocols.io. Is this acceptable?
This one's actually really tricky because just putting a link to a website is also not best practice because websites go down and change all the time. So there's no persistence, there's no long-term preservation, and for reproducibility and long-term archiving purposes, that's not a great practice to link to an individual website. The longevity is very short for data or protocols. But of course, people are correct in answering the poll that taking somebody else's protocol and publishing it under your name is also not great. So ideally, what you would do here is reach out to that group and ask, can I list you as the authors and put it into protocols IO, or would you like to do it directly? If you do put it into Protocols IO and you've been using it, you can offer to transfer it to those people, like publish it and then transfer so they have ownership of it and can create new versions. But yes, you definitely want to cite. If you made any changes to an existing protocol you've seen somewhere else, that's easy. You can share it on Protocols IO and there will be no issues. But if it's exactly verbatim with no changes, the best practice is to get in touch with the other group and either have them share it or have them say, yes, please go ahead, put it on Protocols IO, but list us as authors. But please don't publish for somebody else, because the act of sharing publicly, you are confirming that everyone who's listed as the author agrees to this being public, and that there is a sort of signing off that's supposed to happen. So you don't want to do it implicitly without the other team knowing that this has gone live.
Yep. So it sounds like the audience was correct. It's not acceptable. So you can put it on protocols.io, but you need to make sure that you get in touch and talk to the original authors. So I know this one was very protocols.io specific, but did any of the editors want to add to what Lenny has already said? No. All right. Well, then we are perfectly at time for the question session. Thank you to all of our panelists for running through these scenarios. We'll now see if there's any other questions that have come in. And I think I did see that there was one hand raised as well. So maybe Emma and Marika are in the background. Can you
There
bring
was
some
one
questions up?
question. Lenny did type an answer to it, but it might be worth just giving the info because I don't know if everyone can see it. But there was a question about patents. And if you had a patent, what happens if a researcher published a protocol on protocols.io? So Lenny, I don't know if you want to just actually say what you typed in as the answer.
I just typed that you do want to be careful. I'm not an attorney, but I think it would be considered prior disclosure. So same way as publishing in a journal, you want to think, are we ready to publish it, or is it going through patent application process and we need to talk to the tech transfer and the IP team at our institution. So I would be careful. I don't think it matters for patent purposes whether something is peer reviewed or not. If you've shared it publicly, that is public disclosure.
Thank you. And there was a hand raised. I don't know if that was intentional or not. It's gone down again now, so I'm not sure if someone wanted to speak, but we can unmute you if you do want to. Well, maybe we can't actually. I'm saying that, but you can type a question in if you want to. Or a host might be able to unmute you, but I don't think I'm host.
Yeah, we can unmute.
There was a bit more discussion in the chat about the last scenario as well, in that it didn't state who Taylor put as the authors. So it was a little bit ambiguous. Even though original authors were cited, it wasn't clear if Taylor had put the original authors as the authors on that one. So I think there was ambiguity in saying yes or no, that was correct.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Lenny?
It's not exactly what our last question was, but we have seen over the years that there is often hesitation when a method has been developed over years in a particular group. So it's not about different authors, but the people that started developing a technique have graduated, have left, they're no longer there. You've been building on what they've done, and there is a hesitation and a question of, I'm building on 10 years of work in this lab. If I put myself as the author, I'm taking credit from others, but those people are no longer here. What do we do? It is a little bit tricky, but what we see in those cases, sometimes what the team does is they will share and they'll just say the research group name, like, the Smith lab is what they put in the authors instead of individuals, because it has been evolving over time, and you might not even have context for people who were there 15 years ago to do it. But you still want to share the exact protocol rather than hesitate in this kind of scenario. But it can be tricky.
Yeah. Have we had any other questions come through in the Q&A or in the chat? If anyone has them, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Or if you have another scenario that's different from the ones we've presented that you'd like to raise, we can hear what people think. All right, I've seen one come through. This is a little bit similar. So CJ's asked, if a big company has generated a protocol, copyright, in brackets, and you've made significant changes, but only to particular steps, is this a new protocol that can be published without contacting the company, or should I ask them for permission? So I think I'm assuming when you say, can this be published? So let's start with, can this be published in a journal? Does any of the editors want to start with that?
Gosh, this is really difficult, isn't it? I'm going to say that yes, but obviously for nature protocols, we're looking at the idea that this would have been used in another research paper. So we're looking for it having been used to generate results. I cannot imagine that a company would mind. So I wonder if we would need to contact the company if it was like 12 of the steps were the same as the company steps and 3 were really changed. I don't know. I think we would need to contact the company, wouldn't we? But I cannot imagine that they would mind, because they want people to use their stuff. And it would be increasing the number of people that use their stuff. Lenny, have you seen this?
So I'm thinking if the company is a big biotech or pharmaceutical, that's a little bit different from reagent vendors. What I can say about vendors that share, that sell kits, equipment, is we see people sharing modified protocols from them all the time. And in 12 years, we've never had an issue where the company doesn't like it. In fact, many of them partner with Protocols.io. They want to see what people are modifying. And in those instances, doesn't matter how big the company, exactly as Bronwen said, their goal is not the publication, right? Their currency is not the publication, but selling the reagents and equipment. So if you got it to work, they're happy to see, they want to know what are the modifications, and they want you to share it so that other people can use their antibody or kit. Linda?
Yeah, so you just reminded me that we do occasionally get requests from companies to publish their protocols. So yeah, unfortunately we've had to decline, but in many cases. But yes, that it reinforces your point, I think, that they actually want their articles to be, their methods to be put out more widely. Linda's got her hand up.
Yeah, now after you guys already mentioned a lot of stuff, I wanted to mention just a tiny bit on our journals. And at some point we would stumble across it and asked if there are any third-party rights that we need to consider, and then we would clarify. So either we would ask you to reach out to the company, or we would reach out. So at some point in the process, this will definitely come up. But as you guys already mentioned, I think most people that want that to be shared But you definitely would need to clarify this point, and yeah, probably get in touch with the company as well. But then if they don't mind, I can't guarantee, of course. But it makes sense, as Lenny said, when I want to sell products to be used in the protocol. Right? But yeah, it would come up and we would have a discussion around it.
Yeah. So I think CJ provided a little bit more context around what he was thinking about in specific, but you just said thank you, CJ. So I'm assuming that answered your question. Great. All right. Well, let me check the time here. Looks like we're at time. So, thank you everyone for joining today and for participating in the poll. And thank you again to all of our panelists. We had some tough questions. And have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.